in the co-main event, a couple of big middleweight title challengers are going to be going at it. So you've got the former middleweight champion and Chris Weidman, who is coming off of a loss to Luke Rockhold for the title, then followed that up with a loss to Yoel Romero, where he had definitely had some good spots, but obviously in the third round he shot towards the wrong side, took a huge flying knee, and was finished at that point. So now he's looking to get himself back in the win column, but going against Gegard Mousasi isn't going to be easy. Mousasi's got a pretty good win streak going. The only recent loss he had was the loss to Uriah Hall, but he avenged that and did so in rather spectacular fashion. Made it pretty clear that he's the better fighter. He dominated the first round of the fight that he lost, but got caught in the second. So now seems to be the time for him to show that he's ready to go and show that he's ready for a title shot. And if he does get a win over Weidman, it's going to go a long way for him. As far as how I think this fight's going to go, it's really interesting to me. So Mousasi, his striking is what does a lot of work for him, but he's also really good at getting people down and kind of using his control from there. I don't think he's going to be able to control Chris Weidman in that way because I don't think he's going to be able to get Weidman down. I'd probably expect the opposite to happen. I'd expect Weidman to try to have a wrestling-centric game plan against him. Obviously, he'll start off by trading on the feet. He's a pretty good striker in his own right. Obviously, he's knocked out Anderson Silva. That's not something that a bad striker does. But I'd expect Weidman to try to get in and get some takedowns, control from the top. What's really good about Weidman's game is that not only is he a good wrestler, but his top game jiu-jitsu is evolved with it. So one of my biggest pet peeves in wrestlers who transition to MMA is that when they get people on the ground and they get on top, they like to just settle and guard and just kind of dig their head down and throw a bunch of arm punches that aren't going to do any real damage, but they're just enough to keep the ref from standing it up. And you have to fight that style for a long time. You're not going to finish, and those fights get drawn out, and it puts you at risk of getting finished. To an extent, that's kind of what Chael Sonnen's MO was. Now, Chael would take a few more chances than I think necessary when he'd throw punches. He wasn't exactly the most heavy-handed guy, so he wouldn't really finish people with ground and pound. But when he'd get a little aggressive, sometimes he created too much space and gave his opponents openings. But what I like about Chris Weidman is that he looks to pass, and he does pass very well. Very, very solid top game, very difficult to deal with. So as good as Mousasi is off of his back, I think Weidman should be able to start to work some passes from the top, get into some stronger positions, then over time just be able to overwhelm him, and that's how I'd see this fight ending. But again, if Weidman wins this fight, because of the fact that he's coming off of 2 losses, and both of the losses are to other contenders, not to the champion itself, I don't think you can really put him in a title shot right away. So even if he does win, you figure Yoel Romero is next in line, but I mean, who knows? If Romero still has to keep waiting and they book him with a fight with Luke Rockhold in the meantime, you wonder what happens then. You probably Jacare at that point gets the title shot, but you never know. Same type of thing for Mousasi. If Mousasi wins, maybe he's a guy who you look at as next in line. He'd probably be ahead of Rockhold at this point, but Jacare and Romero, if those two get booked for a rematch, that's also another possible matchup. You don't know what's happening with the middleweight division because, again, we're waiting on this GSP versus Bisping fight to be booked. It hasn't yet. Bisping said that if GSP doesn't take it by July, he'd fight Romero, but would Bisping actually do that? I highly doubt it. It doesn't make sense for him. He's going to make a lot more money off of the GSP fight, so I don't see why he wouldn't wait a couple extra months and get what would be the easiest fight for him, but would also be the bigger money fight for him, a fight where he knows he's going to have pay-per-view points. Why risk it? Why possibly lose to Romero? And then maybe if he still gets the GSP fight after that, he's probably not going to have the pay-per-view points because he doesn't have the belt at that point. So I just feel like he's essentially selling wolf tickets, as one of GSP's old opponents would say on that end. But either way, pretty big opportunity for both of the guys. The guy who loses this fight, it feels like both of these guys have a pretty decent separation between the bottom half of the top 10 and where they're at. So even if they lose, I mean, you look at some of the guys who are on the bottom half of the top 10, maybe a Derek Brunson type of fight comes to the loser of it, but I'd imagine that either of these guys would beat someone like that and they'd be right back in it. But again, you'd rather keep moving up than to have to take a detour, fight someone towards the bottom half of the top 10 and work your way back.